We continue now at the top of Daf Samech Zayin Amud Beis in Mesechet Yevamos. This is Yevamos Daf 67b. The Gemara is analyzing Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's statement. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, let's say the woman was married to a Kohen and then the Kohen dies. So if she has any male children, so even though she's pregnant, so the Avdei Tzon Barzel can still eat Truma because they can eat on account of the male children. And so the question is, why is that the case? Doesn't the Uber also have some portion of a kinyan in the Avodim? And like we said in the Mishnah, if the Uber has a kinyan in the Avodim, it's a problem for the Avodim to have Truma. And so to that, the Gemara says, like Rashi already explained, according to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, in Choshishin Lemiuta, we're not concerned with the less than 50% chance that this will be a viable male who will have a portion in the inheritance. Rashi over here says, in Choshin Lemiuta, we're not concerned with the minority. L'shema yehi zachar v'yesh lo chelik behen. We're not concerned maybe this fetus will be a male and he will get a portion. Debasa ruba azlinu, we follow majority. V'ruba yoldos onekevos omapilos. And in terms of majority, the majority are either going to have a female child or it will be a miscarriage. It's only going to be a minority chance that it is a viable male. Kedefarishas la'el, like Rashi says, I explained earlier on. And the Gemara continues, v'yiba yasem, if you want, I could say another answer on behalf of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Liolam kasavar choshen lemiuta. Could be we hold that we are concerned for the minority chance. However, davdina le takanta Rav Nachman amar Shmuel. We fix the situation according to the way Rav Nachman said in the name of Shmuel. The Amar Rav Nachman amar Shmuel, because Rav Nachman said in the name of Shmuel, Yisomim shabo lachlok b'nichsei avim. When you have orphans who are dividing up the property of their father, bezdin ma'amidin lahen apetropis. Bezdin sets up an apetropis, a caretaker of the property. Uvorer lahem chelek yaf, and he chooses for them the good portions, and higdilu yechol limchos. When they get older, they can protest about the portions that they received. Rav Nachman didei Amar, but Rav Nachman himself says, meaning not in the name of Shmuel, Rav Nachman himself says, higdilu ein yechol limchos. When they get older, they're not allowed to protest. Dimkein makoach bezin yafa, because otherwise, what was the strength of Bezdin if they could just undo what Bezdin did? And Rashi over here says, davdina le takanta means to say, borin lu'uber sha'ar nechasim lechalko, a very simple solution. We're going to be choosing what the orphans get, who's going to get what. So we'll select for the fetus a certain set of property that won't include the Avdei Tzon Barzel. We'll make sure that the Avodim all go to those who are already born. Now, that would be a problem in a situation where all of the children that are born are females. There's no solution. Because maybe the fetus will end up being a male, and then everything will belong to him, so that won't be a solution. But if there are males in the picture who are already born, it's not going to be a problem, because again, we'll do this solution of Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel with an apotropis. And the Gemara continues, Lema de Rav Nachman Tanoihi. So according to the second answer, why don't we say that what Rav Nachman says about the apotropis is actually a machlokas Tanoim? Rashi over here says, Lema de Rav Nachman Tanoihi mido Amar Rabbi Shimon Zucharim Yochelu. From the fact that Rabbi Shimon says that if there are males, then the avodim can eat, Mishum Takanta de Rav Nachman, and now we're saying that's because of the takana of Rav Nachman, that we select what each yosum is going to get. So Mechlal the Tanakama Damar Avdei Tzon Barzel Lo Yochelu. So that implies that the Tanakama who disagrees with Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and says that the Avdei Tzon Barzel do not eat Truma, Afilu b'Takanta Kamar holds that even the Takanta is not going to be a solution. Ve'lez leider Rav Nachman apparently does not hold like Rav Nachman. Ve'ein rashayin lachlok ashi yagdilu, and they don't actually divide up the property according to the Tanakam. It sounds like until they actually become adults, and then they can choose what it is that they want. So according to that, it sounds like what Rav Nachman is saying is subject to a machlokas Tanoim. And the Gemara says, Lo, no, the Kuli Alma Islu de Rav Nachman. Really, everybody does agree with Rav Nachman's solution about the apotropis selecting, that Bezin can select. V'hacha b'choshen lemiuta kamiflgi. And here, really, the machlokas really is whether we're concerned with this minority chance, like we said before. And Rashi over here explains, Lo dekuli alma islahu de Rav Nachman. Everybody agrees with Rav Nachman's solution. And if we would actually have implemented Rav Nachman's solution, everybody would agree that it's fine. We'll just simply make sure the fetus has no portion of the Avdei Tzon Barzel da'achli, and then those avodim could eat truma. Afila Tanakama. That would be true in theory, even according to Tanakama. And the case just happens to be where they didn't do the takana. Rabbi Shimon is saying they can still eat truma, because we're not concerned with a minority chance. But Tanakama chayesh l'miyuta, and the Tanakama is chayesh l'miyuta. He is concerned with that minority chance. And the Gemara continues quoting the Brisa from the previous Amud. Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi Omri Mishamaviv. Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi says in the name of his father, Habas Machil, the daughter can cause to eat, and Haben Eino Machil, but the son is not able to cause to eat. And Rashi over here says, Habas Machil Kasalka Daitach. Right now we think, Hachi Kamar, that this is what Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi means to say, Im Yesh Kan Bas Velo Ben. If there is a daughter who was born, but there was no son, Machil Avodim, so then the Avodim are allowed to have Truma. Avolim Zecharim Heim, but if there are male children, so lo yochlu havodim, so then the avodim are not allowed to eat. That's what we think Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi means to say in the name of his father. And so the Gemara now continues, Ma'ishna ben de lo machil. What's the difference by a son that we say that the avodim are not allowed to have truma mishum chelko shaluber because of the portion of the avodim that is owned by the uber, like we said before. But basnami, the same problem is going to be true if there's a daughter. Lo tachil, she should not allow the avodim to eat mimnei chelko shaluber because there's a portion of the avodim that's owned by the uber. And so the Gemara answers, Amar Abaya, Abaya says, Hacha b'nechasim muatim askinon. Here what we're talking about is when there's very little property. Rashi over here explains, b'nechasim muatim detikon rabbanon, when there's very little property that's being left over by the person who dies, so then the rabbanon have a takana, that habanos yizonu, that the daughters, they get sustenance, meaning they can sustain themselves from whatever inheritance there is. V'habanim yashalu al apsachim, and the sons, they have to go knock on doors, they have to collect money, they have to beg. In other words, in certain situations, when there's a very small inheritance, so the halacha actually is that the daughters take precedence. And that actually is the case that Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi was talking about, and that's why he says if there's a son, eino machil, but if there's a bas, it's machil. As the Gemara says, uchegon di'ika ben bahade bas, and the case is where there's a son together with the daughter. And Rashi over here explains, uchegon di'ika ben bahadod dahach bas, there's a son and a daughter, to have a kulu bechezkas haben midoraisa. Now what ends up happening is that on a doraisa level, before the Rabbanan get involved, everything really should go to the son. Now, if that's the case, we end up with a situation mimonavshach. Uber zocher, who, if the uber is going to be a male, lo adif mehai, so the male uber is not going to be better than the male child. The shaklinu rabbanan mine, because the rabbanan are already taking away all the property. Vukminu brishas bas, and they're giving it over to the possession of the daughter. Vi uber basi, and if the uber is a daughter, kevon diyesh ben zocher lefanenu, since there is a son in front of us who's a male, ein lo uber nekeva chelak bahen, so then the uber that's a nekeva doesn't get a portion, ela b'takan to the rabbanan, except he's only going to get a portion, the uber's nekeva rather, is only going to get a portion based on the rabbanan's takana. V'cham de lo nafek v'chulu, and that's what the Gemara goes on to say, that as long as, etc. As the Gemara here explains, manavshach, either way you look at it, ihai mi abra benhu, if the fetus is a son, so lo adif mehai, no better than the other son that's already alive, mehai dekoi, the one that's already in front of us. And ibasi, and if we're going to say that this fetus is a daughter, so amaya achla b'takanta d'Rabbanan. So the only way that the daughters get is because of a takana d'Rabbanan. Kama de lo nafek la'aver olam, but as long as this child has not been born, lo takinu Rabbanan, then the Rabbanan, they did not make such a takana. And as Rashi over here says, ulahachi nakat ben bahadod, that's why there has to be a son along with the daughter. Do lo have a ben, because if there was no son at all, so islay zechia leuber nekeva midoraisa benechasim betoras yerusha b'hadei hachbas. Then the uber would actually on a doraisa level have some zechia together with the daughter that's alive. V'hachi mefarish milsad Rabbi Yishmael. So here's how you explain what Rabbi Yishmael is saying. Habas im haben macheles. If there's a daughter together with the son, meaning there's a son and a daughter that is alive, so then they're allowed to eat truma, because then no matter how you look at it, the uber is going to have no stake in the avodim. Avolim yesh ben below. But if there's only a son and there's no daughter, so then in that situation, eino machil. So then the avodim are not allowed to eat truma, because then there's a possibility that the fetus is going to have an acquisition in the avodim. And so again, the idea over here is that if you have a situation where there's only a born son, so in that case, if there's nechasim muatim, the rabbanan say all the property goes to the fetus if that fetus is a girl, and therefore the avodim are not going to be allowed to eat truma. But on the other hand, if the situation is where there's a son and a daughter that have been born, so then the Rabbanan are not going to say that all the property goes to the unborn child. Rather, they're going to say at this point in time, since that child is unborn, despite the fact that it might be a nekeva, but since there is a nekeva that's already born, so the Rabbanan say all the property go to the nekeva right now that's already born, and therefore the Avodim are allowed to eat truma, because nothing at this point in time belongs to the fetus. But the Gemara continues, B'mayu kimta b'nechasim watim. But how could you say that what we're talking about over here is a situation where there's very little property, and that's why it's going to the girls? But then look at the end of the statement in the Brisa. It says, Shema yimtza ha'ubar zachar. It says maybe it's going to turn out that the fetus is a male. Ve'ein labanos b'makom ben klum, and the daughters don't get anything if there's a son. So at the end of the Brisa, clearly we're talking about a situation where there's a lot of property. Adrab, on the contrary, nechasim muatim, if we're talking about a case where there's very little property, the banos ninu, then everything does go to the daughters. And so the Gemara says, well, you'll have to say, Seifa asan l'nechasim merubin. You're right. The Brisa shifts gears. The end of the Brisa is talking about a situation where there is a lot of property. And the Gemara continues, "Unechasim muatim debanos ninu." Is it really true that if you have very little property, it goes to the daughters? Ve'amar Rabbi Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. But didn't Rabbi Asi say in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Yesomin shekidmu umachru b'nechasim muatim? Let's say you have a situation of orphans who they quickly go ahead and they sell the little property that's being inherited. Masha machru machru. Whatever they sell is considered to be a good sale. Rashi over here says, Masha machru machru v'keman del inyan mechira b'rishusayu kaimi heichiachli. In other words, even though it really should go to the daughters, but if before the daughters get a chance to take possession, the sons would go ahead and sell it, the sale would actually be good, meaning it's in their possession. So even in a situation of nechasim muatim, really it should belong to the sons until the daughters take possession, and therefore how could the avadim eat truma? You have the same problem over here, because it's going to be a situation where the fetus should have some zechia in the avadim. And so the Gemara says, you're right, Viela mai basta katani. Rather, what does it mean over here when Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi says that if there's a daughter, then the avadim can eat truma? It means to say aim. It really just means the mother. Rashi over here explains, Elamaya basta katani aim v'hachi kamer. Here's how you really read it. Ha'aim machelas avdei melug shalo. We're making a simple distinction between avdei melug and avdei tzon barzel, meaning the mother allows the avdei melug that belong to her to eat the truma because she eats the truma kederech shaiso chelas, because she's able to eat truma. However, v'haben, but when it comes to the son, eino machelas avdei tzon barzel. The avdei tzon barzel are not allowed to eat an account of the son, like we said before, because the uber, since she's pregnant, the uber has a chelik also in the avdei tzon barzel, so they cannot eat truma. But the Gemara says, if so, hainu Rabbi Yossi. That's exactly what Rabbi Yossi was saying. If Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi is just making a distinction between avdei melug and avdei tzon barzel, that's exactly what Rabbi Yossi makes the same distinction. And the Gemara answers, you're right. Kula Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi katani la. That whole section of the Brisa really is Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi. It's all one shita that's being explained. The Gemara continues with the Mishnah, ha'uber v'hayavam v'ha'erisin v'ha'cheresh uben teisha shana v'yom echad. If you have a fetus, if you have a yavam, a brother-in-law, if you have a situation of erisin, of betrothal, if you have a situation of a cheresh, a deaf mute, or if you have a situation of a child that's 9 years old in one day, poslin v'lo machilin. All of those cases, they can passel someone from eating truma, and they do not allow someone to eat truma. And Rashi over here says, ha'uber posel means to say, bas kohen shenisas li Yisrael. Let's say you have a case like we said before. A bas kohen is married to a Yisrael, v'meis, and then he dies, v'hinicha me'uberes, and then it turns out that she's still pregnant. Normally she would return to her father's house and have truma, but now she's pregnant. So again, it passels. It doesn't allow her. The fact that she's pregnant does not allow her to eat truma. Ve'eno machil bas Yisrael shenisas l'kohen. The other way also. Let's say you had a bas Yisrael that married a kohen, v'meis, and then he died, v'hinicha me'uberes, and she's pregnant. So if she would have had a child with a kohen, she can eat truma. But if she's just pregnant with a child, that's not enough to allow her to eat truma. And another case, v'hayavam. Let's say you have a brother-in-law, means to say as follows: bas kohen shomeres liyavam Yisrael. Let's say she's a bas kohen and she's awaiting yibam with a Yisrael. So pasla mitruma savia, she can't have truma from her father's house because she's awaiting the shomeres yavam is enough to passel her from truma. Ubas Yisrael shomeres liyavam kohen. The other way around also, though, it doesn't work. Let's say she's a bas Yisrael and she's awaiting yibam to a kohen. Eino machila, that does not allow her to eat truma. Ve'oirisin, and also betrothal. Bas kohen moreses li Yisrael pasla. Let's say she's a bas kohen but she's betrothed to a Yisrael. That passels her from having truma. Ubas Yisrael mureses l'kohen eino machila, and if she's a bas Yisrael who's mureses to a kohen, that does not allow her to eat truma. And finally, it said uben tes shonim, if he's 9 years old in a day, begemara mefarshla. That last case is going to be explained in the Gemara. And so again, that's what the Mishnah says. All of these cases, poslin v'lo machilin, all of these situations, it passels her from eating truma, but they do not allow her to eat truma. And the Mishnah continues, safek shu ben tes shonim v'yom echad, safek she'eno. Let's say it's a doubt. We don't know if he's 9 years old in a day or not. Or safek hevi bei saros v'safek shelo hevi. Let's say we don't know if he has the two hairs that signify maturity or not. And Rashi over here says, safek shu ben tes, safek she'eno havinami ke ben tes. The point of the Mishnah Mishnah is, even in a case of a suffix, we treat him as if he's 9 years old, uposel, and he passes from Truma, v'amilsa del el kai. This is just a continuation of the phrase before. Suffix shehevi shtei sarus, let's say we don't know if he has shtei sarus or not, el kai, that's also going on above, l'inyan ha'erisin, it's going on in the case of betrothal, the katani poslim, because we say that an erisin can passel. V'hachi kamer, here's what it means to say. Katan shekidei sha'isha, let's say you have a katan that does the kiddush and does the betrothal. So suffix hevi shtei sarus v'kiddush of kiddushin. Now we don't know whether his kiddushin is good because we don't know whether he has shtei sarus, and then it would be a good kiddushin. Suffix shelo hevi, or maybe no, maybe he doesn't have shtei sarus, so maybe it's not a good kiddushin. So the halacha there is also posel baskoin hamureses lo minat truma, that still pasels the baskoin who he betroths from truma. In other words, even though it's a doubt whether there was an erisin, that's enough to pasel her from truma. And finally, the Mishnah says, nafal habayis olav vial bas ochiv. Let's say the house falls on him, and it falls on the daughter of his brother. Ve'ein yodua eizem meis rishon. We don't know which one of them died first. In that case, the Mishnah says, tzarasa choletzes v'lo mes yavemes. Her co-wife is going to do chalitza and will not do yibum. Rashi over here says, nafal habayis olav vial bas ochiv shehi ishto. You have a situation over here where the house falls on him, and also on the daughter of his brother, who's actually his wife, meaning to say this individual married his niece, and the house falls on him and his wife. So safek meis tchila. So now we have a doubt as follows: maybe he died first, v'naflu shtein lifnei echav, and in that case, if he died first, so both of his wives really have fallen to yibum to his brother. Upoteres tzarasa. Now the co-wife who's still alive, the house didn't fall on her, she would actually be poter from yibum and chalitza, mishum tzaras abbas, because she's the co-wife of the daughter. Because again, this guy married his niece, so now the niece is falling to her own father for yibum. That's obviously a case of erva, and therefore the co-wife is tzaras abbas, is totally poter from yibum. However, there's another possibility. Safek bas achiv meisa rishona, could be that his wife, the daughter of his brother, died first. Uveshaz nefila lo yavam lo havoit sarasa. So therefore, at the moment that he died, that the husband died, she wasn't a co-wife of an erva. She wasn't saras erva. Tetnan v'chulan in meiso miyanu tsarosein mutaris. Because in those cases, if the wives that were erva died, or let's say miyanu, let's say they refused the marriage, the point is they're no longer married to them. So then the co-wives are mutter. So in this case, we have an actual suffix over here on the co-wife, whether she's chayiv and yibum. So therefore we say tzarasa choletzes v'lo mes yavemes. She does chalitza not yibum. Aidi dair besafik l'chumra tani labadai. The only reason this case in the Mishnah, it's totally irrelevant to the cases before in this Mishnah, but since it's a case of suffix where we go l'chumra, we tell her she has to do chalitza and not yibum out of a suffix. That's why this case is listed in this Mishnah. And the Gemara now says, Ha'uber, the first case was that the fetus passels and doesn't allow someone to eat truma. And the Gemara explains, Bas Kohen li Yisrael, if we're talking about a marriage of a Bas Kohen to a Yisrael, so then pasula, then the fact that she's pregnant, it passels her from having truma. It's as if she had a child from the Yisrael. Kinu ureha prat lemuberes, because it says kinu ureha, and that excludes the case where she's pregnant. And the other way around also, Bas Yisrael lekoheni. Let's say if you have a situation where she's a Bas Yisrael married to a Kohen, lo machila, so the fact that she's pregnant does not allow her to eat truma. It's not the same as if she had a child from the Kohen, because yulud machil she'eno yulud eno machil, because only a child allows the mother to eat truma, but if it's not a born child, if it's just a situation of a pregnancy, she can't have truma. And then the Mishnah said, hayavam, the same is true by a yavam in a situation of shomeres yavam, it passes her from truma but doesn't allow her to eat truma. And again, the Gemara says the same thing. Ibas Kohen li Yisrael, if it's a situation where she's a Bas Kohen who is awaiting yivam to a Yisrael, pasala, so then that passes her from truma. V'shava el beisavia, because it says she has to return to her father's house. Prat l'shomeres yavam, that comes to exclude a case where she's awaiting yibam, so therefore she hasn't really returned to her father's house. And ibas Yisrael l'kohen, if it's a situation where she's a Bas Yisrael who's awaiting yibam to a Kohen, lo machila, that does not allow her to eat truma, kinyan kaspo amar achmona, because it has to be his kinyan kasef, v'ha kinyan da'achiv, who if she's awaiting yibam, really she's a kinyan of his brother who died. She's not really his kinyan at this point in time. And then we said that by betrothal, the same thing. It's going to passel her from truma and not allow her to eat truma. And again, the Gemara says the same thing. Bas Kohen li Yisraeli, if it's a Bas Kohen who has an erisin with a Yisrael pasela, then it's going to passel her from truma. And we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Samech Ches Amud Aleph.